Now, Asian markets were turbulent after news that Donald Trump had pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal. While sentiment was subdued somewhat, energy shares were the key winners as oil prices rose, with expectations that increased tensions in the Middle East could put upward pressure on oil prices. Tokyo stocks opened in negative territory as investors digested the impact of Donald Trump's withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal and fast-moving diplomacy on North Korea. The benchmark Nikkei share average slipped 0.21%. Hong Kong shares ended higher after fluctuating through the day, with energy firms rallying on the back of a surge in oil prices. The Hang Seng Index rose 0.44%. China stocks ended marginally lower on Wednesday as losses in financial and property shares outweighed gains in energy stocks. The Shanghai Composite Index dipped 0.1%. And over in the United States, Wall Street ended little changed on Tuesday. Energy stocks rose after U.S. President Donald Trump said the United States would quit the Iran nuclear deal, confirming what many investors had expected. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 0.01%. The S&P 500 lost 0.03%, while the Nasdaq Composite Index added 0.02%. Well, most markets are trading in the black, with energy shares getting some cheer from the not-so-good news that Donald Trump is to withdraw the U.S. from the Iran nuclear deal and reimpose sanctions on that country. His predecessor, Barack Obama, has called the decision to withdraw from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action a mistake. Other signatories of the pact include the UK, France, Russia, Germany, the European Union and China. Mr. Trump's decision has fed into higher oil prices, with Brent crude flirting with $77 a barrel. The all-share index has also been up, with mining counters leading the charge. The local currency remains on the back foot, hovering around 12.60 against the greenback. Let's take a look at the indicators. Well, live in studio, I'm joined by Owen Ngomo. He's from Nkunzi Wealth. Thanks very much for joining us, sir, as always.
Thank you for having me.
Great stuff. So, how are markets reacting to Donald Trump's decision? Obviously, good news for energy stocks because, they feed off the higher oil price, but generally it's quite negative news, isn't it?
Yeah, look, a higher oil price is not desirable for any country. Especially the emerging markets that import oil. Countries like us, we don't manufacture or drill any oil out of the ground, so we have to import it, and it's not great. So it's just going to potentially add to this high threat of Iran weakening and the price of fuel going up. As long as the price of oil stays above these levels, we remain very worried.
Before we drill down into oil, why are we seeing the all-share index and European markets up in positive territory today?
Look, the market's actually very volatile of late. There's any sort of news sways the markets one way, and the next day it recovers. Like the JSE yesterday was down, and it recovered as much as it lost yesterday, when the biggest driving story is the bad news coming out of America in terms of the Iran deal, where Donald Trump wants to pull back on this agreement. So we're seeing the JSE trading higher and the rest of the global markets also trading higher. I imagine that people are really trying to find their feet around these high levels of the stock markets globally. We thought we were going to have a big correction, which did not happen in the past month or two. And, people now just keep piling back into the market. But now and again, they take the foot off the pedal.
Before the announcement was made last night around the Iran pulling out of Iran, where were you gauging the oil price, given all the dynamics of demand and supply, and has that changed now?
No, look, there's been good enough reason to expect that there will be demand for oil, especially with America's economy doing so well, and the perception that the rest of the world economy is also starting to consider increasing interest rates on the back of the economies being stable. We did expect that the price of oil will go up, but I didn't think that it will hit $70 because we thought at this stage and at this price you'll get the guys doing fracking coming to drill gas bringing natural gas into the system, you know. But that doesn't seem to be kicking in just yet. And you're seeing the price of oil going all the way to 77, which says to me, you know, it's a matter of days before it gets to $80, which is an important technical level. And if that happens, we could see the price of oil go even higher than 80, which is a very problematic position for us to be in.
I mentioned that the rand is still on the back foot. It really does seem to be edging towards that 13 on a sustainable basis. And of course, these higher oil prices, not good news for us from a price perspective.
Definitely not. It's an inflationary currency at these levels. I believe 1260 is not great, but hey, it used to be at 14 a few quarters ago. So with the currency at 1260, we are concerned. But as long as it stays below 13, I think we should be okay. The concern, like I said, is the imported price of oil, which could push fuel prices higher and food prices as well as energy prices higher. Those could probably put a spanner into the wheels in terms of our GDP growth.
You'll tell me if there are other companies that are exposed, but I know MTN is exposed obviously to Iran. It has obviously operations there, and previously it was not able to take money out. It put out a statement saying that it may well be that with sanctions from the US, they won't be able to do that. But now, if all the other signatories of that agreement are saying that they're not pulling out of the agreement, why can't MTN simply funnel any funds they have through banks or financial institutions that belong to those countries that are signatories to that agreement? Why should the US saying we're pulling out mean everything stops for everybody?
No, look, I mean, I think we're obviously vulnerable because we're the smaller countries. Well, or rather, we were part of the small countries that deal with America. So our bargaining power when it comes to discussing these kind of conversations and trade agreements and negotiation flexibilities with America is very limited. So we're back in an environment where if America, you know, puts the sanctions back on, we are not allowed to trade with Iran, and MTN is unable to take money out of Iran for those very reasons. And I think there's a whole lot of legislation that determines how our relationship with America is shaped based on the sanctions that America levies on other countries. So MTN has been lucky to pull out about 61 odd million euros out of Iran in the previous dispensation of President Obama. But unfortunately, they've got 200 million euros still stuck in Iran. You know, it's not very big, but it's money that could make a difference to MTN.
Yeah, I don't want you to get too technical, but when a company in that situation is reporting its financial results, how does it refer to that money that it has but really can't get hold of?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's obviously books those as income receivable, but puts a footnote to say, hey, we don't know when we're going to get this money, but this money does belong to us and is sitting somewhere out there.
Wow, okay. Of course, yesterday there was a discussion about the introduction of a black bank. Why?
Yeah.
This was held by the Black Business Forum, ABSIP. Why is it so important for South Africa to have a black bank? Because, I mean, the Reserve Bank has indicated that it doesn't matter whether you're red, blue, or green or black. You still have to adhere to the same parameters. And, of course, businesses like banks are in there to make profit and so on. So why is it such an imperative for South Africa to have a black bank? And what are your thoughts?
Look, I mean, it's important in my view to have a bank that is controlled by a black consortium or a black group of smart business people who know what they're doing. It's very important for us to have a bank that will compete with your big four, big five banks. If you think about Capitec, which didn't exist, I think 16 odd years ago, it's got 7 million customers, and it's servicing that market.
It's got 10 million.
Exactly, it continues to grow, right? But it's a company that was set up to service a market that the big four banks at the time didn't think was worth servicing. But now, how big has Capitec grown from listing at 2 rands to over 900 rands? Currently, it's trading at 850. In my humble view, I think it's quite unfortunate. It was a missed opportunity for a black bank to be set up. And when African Bank collapsed as well, I think it was also another missed opportunity for us to say, let's get the Reserve Bank to support the creation of our African Bank, which is what Tata Mutsonyane had wanted to do when he initially set up African Bank, traveling around the country collecting 10 rands from people, you know, to set up the bank. And at this stage, for us to be in South Africa, in Africa, and not have a bank that is controlled by black indigenous South Africans is a big challenge, especially if you look at the rest of the continent, where in Nigeria and Kenya, you've got more than 10 banks that are controlled by locals. And why is it important, Nombu? Because as a black man without a balance sheet, you need a bank that may be structured in such a way that your financial application, your application for financial assistance can be looked at differently by someone who understands maybe that if you've got a tender coming through, you will deliver on the tender, and they look at financing you differently. But if you go to a big bank, they use the standard uniform, which in my view doesn't suit black people. It suits white people who've got a history of a big balance sheets. And that's quite unfortunate, and we can't continue like that.
We have so much more to talk about on that, but we've run out of time. Thank you so much for your insights. Owen Ngomo, he's the Chief Director at Inkunzi Wealth. Well, more business for you after a short break. I'll have some more news.